That's me, 5 years ago at my departure gate at Beijing airport. And if I look relieved and a little shell-shocked, it's because I just had the worst gig ever. Oh, it was bad. I'm talking flee the country bad. So let's rewind and I'll tell you about that time things went seriously sideways in China. It started with an email. It was from the official Chinese TV show version of the Guinness Book of Records, and they asked me if there was a record that I would like to attempt to break on their show. And there was. I've always been the tablecloth guy, so I thought it would be fun to pull the biggest tablecloth ever pulled. Fun, right? So I told the agent that I wanted to go to Beijing and film this show, and my agent said, "That's a great idea."
I'm not sure that's quite what I said.
Well, maybe we remember it differently. Anyway, we signed contracts and started making plans for them to fly me over. We also started to make sure they knew exactly what props I'd need for the trick. The right size table, vases of flowers, trays, glasses, crockery, that kind of stuff. And then off to Beijing I went. I arrive at the hotel and meet some of the other people who'll be on the show, all people who can do one thing better than anybody else in the world, which is strange and beautiful. I get given my vegetarian meal, which is a couple of pieces of lettuce floating in a bowl of warm water, and then go upstairs to my room for a protein bar and my very hard bed. Jet-lagged, but very excited to be on another ridiculous adventure. The next day, I get told that even though we had weeks and weeks of emails going to and fro about which props I'd need them to get, they haven't got anything. So they take me out to a market to find the right stuff, which, because we're now tight for time, we can't really get. So we end up with stuff that's kind of right, but not really. And then I get to the studio. And it's one of those big hangars, big enough to drive cars around in and still hold an audience of several hundred people, which is what will be there in a couple of days' time when I do my thing. I have a chat with the producers and director, and they start to tell me about the trick they would like me to do on the show, and it's not what we agreed, like, not at all. I mean, it involves tablecloths vaguely, but it seems completely made up and not, in fact, possible. So I say, no, I'm here to pull the longest tablecloth. And they talk amongst themselves for a couple of minutes and then switch back to English and say to me, "Okay, you can do that as well." I say, "Okay, I guess." And that's when the feeling started to set in that something was off. The next day I meet the Guinness Book of Records officials who wear those branded blazers even when they're not on camera, and I start to talk to them about the ins and outs of pulling the longest tablecloth, and they seem puzzled and confused, which is something that at the time I completely failed to pick up on. I spend the next couple of days hanging around with some of the other performers, and slowly but surely things start to feel more and more hinky. There's an acrobat who specialises in a very specific piece of equipment. He's the current world record holder in it, but he wants to break his own record live on TV. Except they made the equipment to different specifications, so that when he rehearses, he injures himself. But just by chance, they've got a Chinese performer who's been training with their version of the equipment, so he can do it fine. There's a circus performer who can walk on ballet point shoes on the top of champagne bottles. Beautiful thing, but they got her beer bottles, so she can't do it. But the Chinese performer they've got waiting in the wings, who's been training with the beer bottles, can. The more I chat to the other performers, the more the whole thing starts to feel like one big bait and switch. I start to remember that in some of my emails with them, they mentioned the idea of having a competitor on the show, someone who would try and do my trick better than me, and I shot it down, but now it seems suspicious as hell. Was this whole thing just about flying out Western experts so they could be beaten on TV in a crooked competition by Chinese performers? No, that's ridiculous. The next morning, I'm woken by a phone call. telling me that despite having had no rehearsals or meetings, I'm performing on the show in front of a live audience tonight. I'm still not sure what I'm even doing, but okay then. I put on my suit and my game face. I get the car to the studio with another performer. He's done a few of these shows before, and he tells me that, yeah, they usually spring a surprise competitor on you and then cheat it so you lose. But everyone kind of goes along with it because it's TV. And I get butterflies in my guts, and I start to feel like I'm a long way from home. Once I'm back at the studio, we do the camera rehearsal. Camera rehearsals are there so that the camera operators can plan out the exact shots they'll use. So, if it's not in the camera rehearsal, then it's not going to happen on the show. And my rehearsal includes the trick that they want me to do, but not the trick that I travelled 5,000 miles to do. I ask about it and I get ignored, and I end up furious and terrified, now certain that they plan to humiliate me on television. I ask to speak to the producer. It's important, I say. Sure, they say. Soon. Go wait in your dressing room. So I wait, and more hours go by, and I keep waiting, and I get told soon, and more hours go by, and I keep waiting, and I get told soon, and more hours go by. Finally, literally 15 minutes before the show is due to start, I get granted an audience. As I walk to her office, I can hear the crowd downstairs in the studio waiting for the show to begin. I voice my concerns that we're not doing what we agreed to do and that they're clearly setting me up to fail. The room is full of producers, co-producers, executives, and they all start yelling at me, literally standing over me and leaning down and shouting into my face. If I don't do the show, I get told, they won't pay me, they'll kick me out of my hotel, they'll cancel my plane ticket and my visa, maybe it won't work so good now. In the middle of all the chaos, I take out my phone and call my agent back in England, and I tell him what's going on, and I hold up the phone so that he can hear what the room sounds like, and my agent says,
"Get out. Now. Airport."
So, I get up and I leave. The producer clearly thinks that I've capitulated, that I'm going to go and get ready to do the show, but they have deeply underestimated my ability to be a dick when correctly inspired. So I don't go and get ready, I go and hug the other performers goodbye, I pack my stuff, and for the first time in my life, I walk out of a gig. Into the middle of nowhere, on the outskirts of Beijing, at night, in the snow. And I think to myself, well, this'll be a funny story to tell if I ever make it home. I see the lights of a hotel across the road, so I carefully pick my way across the dual carriageway, walk into reception and ask them to get me a taxi. "Oh no," they say, "taxis don't come out this far." That's a bad sign. So I think on my feet. I go back to the studio, talk my way in and find the lowliest, youngest staff member I can get, and I bribe him $50 to drive me back to my hotel. He says yes, and he's probably fired now. I go to my room in the hotel, quickly pack my stuff and jump in a taxi to the airport. I figure that it takes about 3 hours to film the show. So, if the visa threat was serious, then they'll probably be too busy to follow through with it and cause me problems at immigration until later tonight. So, I have about 3 hours to get on a plane, or I might be ending up in a cell instead. What I didn't know at the time is that while I was in a taxi racing to the airport, my agent was having a very real problem getting me on a plane. Turns out that booking a one-way ticket out of Beijing on very short notice raises all sorts of red flags.
All sorts of red flags.
But literally, as I walk into the airport, I get a text telling me the flight that I'm booked on. I hold my breath as I go through border control, and finally, I'm homeward bound. It's such a shame. The Guinness Book of Records was a childhood treasure for me. I used to get one every Christmas, although sometimes money was tight, so I'd get last year's. It was a gateway into a world of crazy, amazing people and things, and I was hoping to join that gang. I don't blame Guinness for what happened. The heel in all of this was a TV company with a dumb agenda that made everything much less fun, especially for me. It is a pity though, And I do still think about one day pulling the longest tablecloth ever pulled. Thanks for watching. It's worth pointing out, I think, that in the past I've had fun both on TV and in China, but that was a unique situation. Now, at the time of posting this, the COVID-19 pandemic is still in full swing, which means that as a live performer, I've had no work and no revenue for about 10 months now. So, since it seems that my YouTube channel is the only venue still available to me, it would mean a lot if you would subscribe. So thanks in advance for that. And if you're not doing so already, please do follow me on Twitter and Instagram and share this video with anyone that you think might enjoy it. And perhaps even consider supporting my work on Patreon. All the links are below this video. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.